Hello, my name's Todd Stibnick. I'm the State Director of AARP Nebraska. AARP has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years through information, advocacy, and resources. Part of that includes helping to improve the places that we live so people can thrive no matter their age, ability, or background. We all want places to live where there are transportation options, housing is affordable and works for our needs as we age. There's access to outdoors and public spaces, and there are ways to stay connected with loved ones and neighbors. Ultimately, our vision is for a future in which communities, urban, suburban, and rural, are great places for all. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Paige Wrights, the Deputy Director of the Union for Contemporary Art in Omaha. Paige is here to tell us about a really unique exhibit that they have entitled Undesigned the Redline that tells the story of zoning discrimination policies in Omaha and how these historic policies still shape our community today. Welcome, Paige.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for being with us. So, the exhibit is entitled Undesign the Redline. First, let's start with what is redlining?
Yeah, thank you. Redlining is a term used to describe a discrimination practice here in the United States that essentially bars customers from services that they might have access to, usually based on where they live, based on neighborhoods. And it's a practice where neighborhoods are basically scouted to determine what their investment worth is. And it largely is based on, we know now, ethnic and people of color neighborhoods tend to be deemed more likely to be hazardous, and so they are not given access to the services that they need. Redlining as a term can be used to describe a large range of ways in which this discrimination practice shows up, but it also specifically speaks to a practice that the United States government put into play in the 1930s with the Homeowners Loan Corporation Act, where they created 239 maps around the country and had surveyors go out to neighborhoods and decide whether a neighborhood was worthy of investing in and therefore giving mortgages to homeowners to buy property in those spaces, or whether the investment was deemed hazardous. And with these redlining maps, what we know now are they are historically where the immigrants and people of color lived, the Black population, and they still today are neighborhoods that are suffering disinvestment, lack of resources, and a whole other slew of sort of like lacking social services and things that we need for a vibrant community to thrive.
Well, that maybe gets to my next question is, these were historic practices. Why is it important for us to understand redlining today?
Yeah, I think it's really, it goes back to that age old thing of like, you don't know where you need to go or like to understand the context if you don't know where you've been. And I think that these redlining maps that we have in the the Redline exhibit really start to show you that neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods, when you think of a neighborhood in your community that might not have all of the services that you might not call a healthy community, like what caused that? Did the neighborhoods just end up this way or not? And I think that the redlining maps in this exhibit really show you that no, this was a very intentional thing that barred neighborhoods from disinvestment. It wasn't by accident, or it wasn't because a community didn't want to invest in their own neighborhood. It really was this methodical, intentional way to keep investments out and de-incentivize investments. So the Union's in North Omaha, and it used to be a really thriving community, and really this practice in the 30s is kind of where people point to say that without people having ways to access capital to buy homes, that sort of started the decline of the neighborhood. So I think that's why it's really important to understand. One thing that has been really interesting as we've had this exhibit is starting to kind of mirror different maps. So you use the redlining map, and then we'll mirror, like most recently, like where's COVID still like really spiking in our community? It kind of mirrors the redlining map. What community in our city has the least tree canopy, which we know causes hotter temperatures and all of these things, and it kind of mirrors the redlining map. So it starts to show that this practice in the 30s like is still having significant impact on our communities today.
I guess we shouldn't be surprised when we create sort of institutionalized disparities that we have disparities that sort of continue to exist and pop up in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
Again, you touched on it a little bit, but how do the policies of Redline, how did they affect Omaha sort of back when they were first implemented, and do we still see it today beyond these sort of disparities you just talked about?
Yeah. A lot of the ways in which it affected Omaha in the 30s is that it contributed to other social policies that we now know of, like white flight. So once these neighborhoods have been deemed hazardous, they were integrated neighborhoods, and the white homeowners that lived in the redlined communities, which are predominantly North and South Omaha, were then incentivized to sell their homes at a much cheaper rate. Like there was this narrative that you're going to lose investment the longer you hold on to this, like you should get rid of it. And then that allowed an opportunity for predatory contract buying to come in. So people would buy the homes at a very, very low rate, and then kind of almost like a rent to own situation with the communities that couldn't afford to get a mortgage or were not allowed to get a mortgage, where they re-rented these houses out to them, and it was at a much higher interest rate. And if they missed one payment, they were no longer considered the homeowners. And so they lost all of their investment in that home. So I think that that's one way that in the 30s it impacted the communities. And then still today, like I was saying, with those maps of how other social disparities like continue to show up when a community is not given access to resources it needs to thrive. We still see it all the time in terms of those different ways in which people don't have access to the things that they need. It also impacts the ability for a community to grow and thrive. That we know that in North Omaha, there used to be a much more a higher density of population. And it's not that people just chose to move out. It's that, people were buying the homes and then not taking care of them. And the renters eventually didn't have adequate living situations. And then those homes got demolished and it was never rebuilt. And then when you see that decline in population, other social kind of like institutional things start to happen. So one thing in Omaha that we point to and we learned a lot about through having this exhibit at the Union was with the federal government in the 90s, early 2000s told Omaha as a city, your sewers are beyond and they need to be fully replaced. And we're all very familiar now with the sewer separation project that for the past few decades Omaha's been going through. But when they designed and engineered those sewers, they were for the population that exists today, not the population that used to exist in North Omaha, nor the population based on land that we know could exist in North Omaha. And that presents a situation where it de-incentivizes developers to develop the community because now they're going to be responsible for making the sewer bigger. If they want to put up like say a 40 apartment unit, they're also responsible for this city infrastructure, which makes it not a great investment for them, or like makes it much more expensive for them to develop the community and make there be more access to housing options. So it kind of is this perpetual cycle, of the 30s. Like I like that you pointed out that it was a very institutional, systemic thing. It wasn't just by accident. It wasn't just poor planning. It was very, very intentional. The surveying book that surveyors used to determine whether a neighborhood was a red, a green neighborhood, which is like the best investment, a blue neighborhood, a yellow neighborhood, which was like this neighborhood's in decline, but we'd caution you to give a mortgage out. These are to the bank. The banks really are the ones that used these different color codings, or a red, which is deemed hazardous. That one of the primary things that the surveyors were using to determine where a neighborhood stood was the color of the people that lived there, the population. Is this a primarily their language Negro neighborhood? Is it primarily immigrant neighborhood? Is it mostly white? And that was one of the primary factors that they used to determine whether or not a community was worth investing in. And that really is, you can't hide it. I think that's why redlining often is pointed to as like, this is where we know that the wheel of inequality, it started well before the 30s in these maps, but this is like you can't deny the fact because it's written into the surveyor's manual that we systemically held these neighborhoods back and these communities back. So I think that that's one reason too, that it's really important to fully understand how these policies back then were really affecting the communities, but still today have significant impact.
That's great. So the union now has this exhibit called Undesigned the Redline. Let's talk a little bit about the exhibit. What's the backstory to the exhibit? How did you guys come about it? What are your goals with the exhibit?
Yeah. So this exhibit is designed by a Bronx-based social design firm called Designing the We. And it's one aspect of the work that they do, but they also go many steps further in terms of community organizing and bringing communities together to sort of use neighborhood voice to determine how things change and shift and are invested in their community. But with this exhibit, this is really their starting point. Like, let's introduce and expand awareness about this practice and how it has contributed to a long timeline of social policies that have perpetuated inequality in our country. But it also isn't all, the negative. They also do a great job at highlighting in the exhibit all the ways in which people-powered movements have pushed against the systemic policies and practices that have been holding communities back. And so their goal, Designing the We's goal, is to have this exhibit in every community that has a redlining map. So it's 239 cities across the United States, with the primary goal of the more awareness that our communities have about how we got here, the more empowered we are to do something about it. That it's really easy for not just, white people, not just people that don't primarily live or experience redline communities, to think that this is just the way it is, right? It's not my community. I didn't have anything to do with that. The exhibit of Undesigned the Redline really helps us see that, like, we all have a responsibility. This is our community. And that as people and through people-powered movements, we can work to, as the title of the exhibit is, Undesign the Redline, that we all have small ways in which we have power in our personal lives to undesign some of the effects that redlining has created in our community. And I'd say for the union, that's our primary goal, is just making sure there's much more awareness about redlining and about how our communities got to where they are today, and what can we do to reinvest. Like, that's really, I think, the primary goal of the exhibit.
So I was very fortunate to be able to come and visit the union and see the exhibit not that long ago. One of the things that I was really blown away with is how interactive the exhibit is. It's not a passive experience. It's designed to be interactive and for people to share their thoughts on it. Talk to me a little bit about that part of the exhibit.
Yeah, I love that they designed it that way too. And I think that it was very intentional to kind of back to what I was saying about how we all have power, that yes, this was something the federal government mandated and perpetuated, but who makes up the government? It's people. And so even if you think that in your role, you aren't doing anything to push against inequality or to fight against inequality, or you don't have power to recognize it and stop it, we all have that power. Whether you are a stay-at-home mom, you still have that power in how you show up in your community and what you fight for. Or if you're a banker, or if you're an engineer, like, there are so many ways in which this exhibit pulls you in to see that the role that I play in society does impact the inequalities that are continuing to exist in our community. And I can undo it through community, through conversation, through continued learning. So I think that that's really one of the reasons they plug in the interactive pieces, is so that exhibit viewers really get a moment to reflect on, what does this mean for me? Not just, a concept that happened in a community, but really, what's my role? They have a mirror at the end, where you look and read, like, what are 10 lies that redlining taught me? Like, what are the ways in which we've all been acculturated to believe certain things about certain communities that simply are not true? And I think that's one of the awesome reasons that kind of interaction was designed into the exhibit.
Well, and it also allows people to make their thoughts a part of the exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
You're encouraged to write down reflections and attach them to the exhibit itself. I really appreciated that interactive nature. It wasn't a passive experience, so
Yeah.
that was great.
Yeah, thank you.
So how long will the exhibit be at the Union? I fear that it's coming to an end fairly soon here, so I want to encourage
Yes.
people to get out and see it.
Yeah, so we've had it up since June of 2019. Of course, COVID happened, so the in-person experience wasn't as long as we were hoping, but we were able to shift to a lot of online engagement during COVID when we were closed. But now the building at the Union is reopened, and we are allowing visitors to come into the exhibit, and it will be open through the end of March. In our facility. We are hopeful and working with partners that it will possibly move to another facility in Omaha, but we don't have details on that yet. We'll definitely make sure we're sharing loud and far if that happens. But at the Union, you can come see it through the end of March. However, we do have online tours that we recorded and a 3D tour as well. So if you're not able to make it down to the Union, there's still a lot of ways that you can interact with this in a virtual setting. So you can like walk through the exhibit through the 3D tour and then watch on YouTube. We have a 2-part tour from Alexia Plumer, who's our awesome tour guide. So that's also a way that people can engage, and we'll leave those up so that even if it's gone from our building, there's still access to that information on our website and through our different media channels.
That's great. I also understand you have a important community discussion on this issue coming up soon. Talk to us about that and how people can engage in that.
Yeah, so throughout COVID, we've been doing community conversations that are just another way to engage with the exhibit and the material and really be in conversation with community members. So that's our last one is gonna be on February 23rd at 7 p.m. and it will be via Zoom. And people can register by going to our website at www.u-ca.org or just Google the Union for Contemporary Art will come to the top. And registration for that is on our homepage. So you'll be able to click on that and register. And it's a totally free digital event. And it really is designed so that you are getting some of the history and the information presented in the exhibit, but we've kind of condensed it and really focused too on sending people into breakout rooms and being in conversation with other community members. Because like you pointed out that the exhibit does a great job of asking people to also include their perspective, and that we really believe that like that's how we learn, that's how we grow, that with everybody's voice at the table, different perspectives are really going to enhance the learning and the experience of the exhibit. So that's what the community conversation is all about. We still encourage people to watch the tour prior to the community conversation. So if you have, it's about an hour and a half to watch Alexia's tour and then come to the community conversation. I think that's the best way to engage, but you don't have to if you don't have time. We still really go over some of the things we talked about today about what's the big concepts of the exhibit, the important things you have to know to take away. So.
Stepping back from the exhibit a little bit, tell us more about the Union, your mission, and just more about it in general.
Yeah, so the Union for Contemporary Art, we are an art center in North Omaha, located at 24th and Lake Street. We've been an organization for 11 years now, so still fairly new in terms of art organizations in our city. And we work kind of at the intersection of art and social change. We're really interested in the role artists play in our communities and how our artist voice really helps push for more equitable, more thriving, like more economically thriving neighborhoods. And so we do that through a lot of different programs. The Undesign the Redline is kind of part of our exhibition program. We also have a big gallery space in our building, the Wanda D. Ewing Gallery, where we work with contemporary artists. We kind of have 3 main goals in our exhibiting program, which is working with artists of color, artists that are local, regional, so really making sure artists here in Omaha and in the region have access to the things they need to thrive as artists, and then artists that are using their practice for social change. So like what is that they really have something that their artistic voice wants to make sure we're talking about in our society. We also have cooperative studios, our co-op studios. We've got a digital media lab, a ceramic studio, a print shop, a fiber lab, and a photo darkroom. And that is a really accessible way for artists, anybody who's looking to have access to the equipment that they need to make their work. So it's a $15 a month pass fee to have access to all of those spaces. And there's also a lot of opportunity to dive deeper and learn different mediums. We do free art classes for kids in the community. We have 5 studios in our building that we have as part of our fellowship program. So every year we grant out those studios to free to local artists, and they work as a cohort to really engage with North Omaha and do projects with our community. And we also support them through financial resources. Financial resources are huge. So that's another program we have called Populous Fund, where we re-grant money. We're about to launch also on February 23rd, 6 $10,000 grants that will go to artists in the community within an 80-mile radius of the Union to support their creative practice in a project that they're interested in doing. We have a theater space, so we do theater by contemporary Black playwrights in our building. And then we also have a garden. So we grow a lot of food for our neighbors, and in the summer do free produce and pantry stand for the community. So it really is this, how can art and community engagement all show up together, and how can art help create a vibrant, connected community?
Well, it's a beautiful space. It's a space designed to showcase art. And so I was really impressed with just the physicalness of the space when I was there. So you've said it before, but again, tell people where you're at or where they can learn more about the Union and plan a visit.
Yes, so you can find out a ton more about us online at our website, www.u-ca.org. You can also find us on all the social media channels if you look up the Union Omaha, and then come visit us. So we're at 24th and Lake. Our address is 2423 North 24th Street. And yeah, we'd love to have you come visit our facility or engage with us online. And yeah, that's what we're all about, the community engagement. So we hope that you truly do engage.
Well, this is great, Paige. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
On behalf of AARP Nebraska, I want to thank Paige and the Union for Contemporary Art for joining us today, and remind people to learn more about AARP's Livable Communities work. Please visit aarp.org/livable-communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.